Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 11th, 2025 meeting of the town board. The board has been in executive session, and I'd like a motion to open the work session.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we will start the work session today with a presentation by Commissioner of Public Works, Bart Carey, on PFAS and microplastics. And we're doing this today because this has been sort of perennial question in the community about what our PFAS situation is with our water. And of course, microplastics is on people's minds. So I thought it would be a good idea for Bart to share current information with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to explain how we are doing with PFAS and microplastics in the town of Newcastle. As most people are aware, PFAS are a series of man-made chemical compounds that persist in the environment for long periods of time. They're often called forever chemicals. They are regulated now in water systems. We started testing for them in 2020. And there is a new rule in effect that took place in April 26, 2024. The EPA published a national primary drinking water regulation for 6 PFAS compounds. There are many PFAS compounds, but these 6 are going to be regulated now, and the new regulation establishes maximum contaminant level for 5 of those PFAS compounds, and for an additional 4 that could be combined, and they're calling that a hazard index for those other 4. So there's a limit for those. Prior to this regulation that has been set for the country, New York State had a regulation set at 10 parts per trillion for these compounds. The new regulation lowers that down to 4. So there is a 3-year initial monitoring period, and the town of Newcastle has already begun that. So the point of monitoring for the water is at the entry point to the water system. So when we talk about water, we talk a lot about raw water. That's the water that we get that comes into the Millwood Water Treatment Plant, and it goes through the treatment processes there. And when it leaves the plant, that's called the entry point to the distribution system. So a lot of samples are taken at the entry point. We also take samples out in the distribution system from the pipes that are throughout the town. So an important thing to note is that compliance is going to be determined on an annual running average. So even though the MCL is set at 4, that's based on a running average. So if you had a level at 6, if you have a level at 2, the next time you're still at the 4 or below. So some great news is that our primary drinking water supply, the Catskill water system, we have detected no PFAS in that supply at all. In the Croton water supply, we have detected PFOS and PFOA. And most of the sampling that we have for the Croton is on the raw water. And the reason for that is that we hardly ever use the Croton water supply, so that's a good thing. We mostly use the Catskill, but we are still required to sample the Croton. We only have one set of data on entry point samples that were from the Croton water supply, and that's from back in 2021 when we were on that system for a couple of months while New York City DEP was doing work on the Catskill aqueduct system. And we did that.
And Bart, could you describe how often we are on that Croton water system?
So it's pretty infrequent. We were on the Croton system in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And those were periods when the New York City DEP was doing work on the Catskill Aqueduct in preparation for the project on the Delaware Aqueduct.
Sorry, when you say we were on it in those years, was it for those
those years continuously or
No.
on and off in there?
Never. It was only for short periods of time. I think it ranged from a month to maybe 3 months at most. So I pulled some of the numbers. So in 2019, the water that came from the Croton was 6.1562% of the water used for the whole year. In 2020, it was 4.2837%. And the highest year was 2021, it was 20.0307%. If you look at the annual water quality reports for 2022 and each year, you'll see there's less than 1% of use on the Croton, and that's only because we turn that on twice a year to test it. It's our emergency backup supply is what it is, and we invested a lot of money in that in preparation for using it in those 3 years. So we wanna make sure that it's maintained in a state of readiness at all times.
So wait, so you turn it on twice a year to test?
Yes, for
How long does it stay on?
it's less than 6 hours each of those days.
Okay,
So in the water quality report, you'll see the numbers that we report for those. And those are actually slightly elevated, so in 2024, for instance, we used just a little over 1 million gallons that we're reporting, but that's more like 800,000 gallons because the Inningwood pump station where the Croton water comes from is a little over a mile away from the filter plant. So every time we turn it on, we flush out the entire line, which is 100,000 gallons worth of water before we even bring any of it into the treatment plant.
Where does that, part of my stupid question then, where does that go when you flush it out?
It's into the environment. It's raw water from the reservoir, so
It just recycles it back in?
no, it just goes out into the environment out in the front of the water treatment plant.
Okay.
So New York City DEP, before leading up to those 3 years that we were using the Croton in 2019, 20 and 21, had let us know far in advance that was gonna be coming. I think there's a generator project that we did there that started in like 2013. And at that point, we were already aware that the DEP was gonna require us to go on the Croton. And that's why the generator was installed, so that we had a redundant power supply there as well. They've given us no indication of any future need to go on to the Croton water system. And we are in communication with them throughout the year. So for PFAS, I would say that we're in very good shape. The other point of information I have on that is that we did testing for what the EPA calls UCMR. That's Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, and that's UCMR 5. That testing was required to be done at between 2023 and 2025. As always, we're very proactive in all of our testing. We completed this testing in 2023, the first year that it was out. And that testing was for 29 PFAS compounds, not just the 6 that the new regulation is for. So it's for 29 of those and also for lithium. And we did testing on, again, the Catskill Aqueduct at the entry point, and those were all non-detect, which means that they were less than the limits that the lab can detect to, which are pretty low. These are all in parts per trillion.
So you have levels for the Croton water? If they're there, it's present, at what level?
Right, so we were unable to do UCMR 5 testing on the Croton water because hasn't been in use, so we were unable to take entry point samples. So we do have some data on the raw water. To get those samples, we have to drive over to the gatehouse at the reservoir, and they'll give us some out of the reservoir. So we've done some testing on that water, and that's where we were able to get the PFOA and the PFOS information. And we do that annually. And based on the numbers that we're seeing there, we would not, if we needed to go onto that water for an extended period of time, we would not be in violation because we're just below 4, mostly 3.7. There was one that was 4.16. So I mean, if we had to use it for a short period of time and then we're using water when it's non-detect, our average would be well below 4.
The lab that we use is that standardized across the state or cause this lab isn't detecting, but would there be other labs that might, or how do we choose the lab?
So the labs are all with NELAP accredited. It's a national program, and our PFAS samples are sent to PACE Analytical Labs. They're a giant company with labs throughout the whole country. That's for the PFAS samples. Our ordinary routine samples for stuff that we do, like chlorine and there's TOC and other stuff. There's a lab down in Westchester County where we take all of those. We take bacteria samples there every day. So the system is continually checked for bacteria, and that's at the local lab down in Valhalla. And so these labs all, when they're conducting these samples, there's an approved method by the EPA that's used, so that even if we went to a different lab, they're supposed to use the same instrumentation, the same devices, and follow all of the procedures. So for UCMR 5, you would actually see if you read through the sheet. So 25 of those PFAS compounds, they use EPA method 533. The other 4 of the PFAS compounds, they use EPA method 537.1. And every lab should be following the same procedure, every accredited lab, and everybody should be using accredited labs for their samples.
Thank you.
So I think as far as PFAS compounds, we are in good shape here in Newcastle. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those or look into those further.
Could you tell me again what your schedule is for future testing? Because there are 2 categories of testing. You have one for the NPDWR, the new standards, and then the old standards, the UCMR.
Right, so that's
Right. So those have different requirements for testing. So when will your do those merge at some point? I think the UCMR with the 29 different chemicals includes the new final PFAS regulations for those chemicals.
Right, yeah, and so the
So are you
other,
kind of are you treating them as 2 separate categories, or are you kind of merging them together in your testing schedule?
they are treated separately, and oftentimes what they'll do when there's a new contaminant that we monitor for is they'll do do it quarterly, and depending on your results, if your results are very low, then it could turn into an annual for the next year. So it's based on the results that you're getting. So like when we first started testing for PFAS compounds in 2020, I think we did quarterly monitoring, and then at a certain point it was reduced to annual because of the low numbers that we were getting. And back then, the PFAS compounds, there was far fewer. It wasn't, the 29. And those 29 that are on the UCMR 5, they may add future ones. That's why they do that testing. So the 6 that were added last April, and in a few years they may add some more of those.
Okay, and I'm sorry if you went over this already. Maybe I didn't get everything down to so the agency.
EPA back in
That's the
last
EPA.
April 2024.
Okay, and the UCMR.
That's also the EPA.
Okay.
And that's a separate program. So the UCMR it's they're unregulated contaminants. So they're gathering information to see what water systems have as far as these compounds, and then they use that information to set future regulations. And there will be a UCMR 6, it's a continual process, and they also have a contaminant candidate list, and compounds are put on there and they're proposed to be on the next UCMR.
If we can test and detect these, is there any way to filter them?
There are treatment techniques for them, yeah, I mean, that's something that we have been monitoring as well. It's relatively new, so initially there weren't that many treatment techniques for them, but there are more that are being developed now, but it's still, it's kind of an emerging situation still at this point.
I could just add to that, to treat PFAS, what water companies are doing, they're installing what's called GAC filters, granite activated carbon, so it's basically like a big Brita filter, and that's what removes PFAS, it's a carbon filter, so that's what they use, and the huge cartridges that get installed,
Okay.
so that's what they use.
Yeah, that's one of the methods. They've also developed ion exchange, and there's other things that are in the works as well.
So I assume at some point we're looking to that, because if there's more of this in the water, it's great that we're potentially finding, well, it's bad, but it's important that we're finding it. And as it increases, finding it's not the solution, it's removing it, so it very well could be a cost that we will have to
In the future,
handle in the future.
it may be, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if we had to use the Croton water more often than we have.
Yeah, it's definitely something we should prepare for,
Hopefully there'll be
Yeah.
grants and things like that down the road.
right? I mean, we can test, but we can't control what might suddenly appear in the water system.
Correct, yeah, I mean, these things typically don't, suddenly appear. When they're new,
Not suddenly,
yeah,
maybe
okay.
gradually, but
Okay.
appear nevertheless.
Yeah, well, they're new contaminants that are detected, but even, the Croton, from what we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, the levels of PFOA and PFOS have been relatively stable. Still, it's not something that we wanna see, so that's why we're very thankful that we were able to use that water. And the DEP has given us notice several years before we typically had to use the Croton water.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, and I guess, Rob, this is a question for you, maybe for now, but what would the cost be of a system that Lena was describing, or that ion system, that ion exchange system?
It would
That
be
Bart was
millions of
describing.
dollars. Yes.
Okay, how many millions?
The bottom line is
That
it have to
would
be
be-
grants, I mean,
Right,
the money has
right.
to come from somewhere.
We would have to have an
Right, but
consultant
I'd like to
look
have the
at that and
information.
come up with an estimate.
And
Yeah.
do you know like what the lead time would be to install something like that? So if we got a heads up that we were gonna have to use the Croton water in like 2 years, would we be able to prepare to filter it or treat it in that time frame?
People using it now without treatment.
Right, not in 2 years, no. And so we would still be in compliance, even if we needed to use it for a short period of time because of the running average. But this new regulation, I think the treatment actually isn't even, it's required until 2029. So this is the not the UCMR, but this is the PFAS, National Primary Drinking Water Regulation. So the initial monitoring is now through 2027. Systems have 5 years to implement solutions to reduce PFAS if monitoring shows that drinking water levels exceed these MCLs, and our water does not exceed the MCL. Beginning in 5 years, 2029, water systems that have PFAS, which violates one or more action to reduce levels of PFAS, must provide notification to the public of the violation.
So presumably, we are just gonna keep monitoring and getting undetectable levels, and if that changes, then we have 5 years, did I understand that?
We'd have until 2029, but we don't foresee exceeding this MCL in any way, shape or form. We would need to go on the Croton year round, and then we could possibly exceed it depending on all of the test results.
Are any of the communities that use Croton primarily or have they taken any steps? Are they looking at any of these treatment options that you're aware of?
So the only community I'm aware of that uses Croton besides New York City DEP is Ossining. and they're in the midst of building a brand new
Right.
treatment plant, which is like
Will it have the
$70 million.
capabilities to handle this, the new treatment plant, do you know?
I would think so. I would have to check with them exactly on what treatment techniques they're building into their new plant.
Do you think they're getting grants, or is that what you asked?
I'm confident that if
They must.
PFAS ends up being a, you know,
Bankrupt municipalities if they don't.
a prominent, you know, contaminant that is found far more prominently in our water supply going forward, that there will be grants.
And
You
there
know, for
there
clean
are
water.
grants now. There's community, I don't know if Lynn you know more, there's communities that have major issues with this.
Yeah,
Lots
ju-
of communities.
right.
Yeah, and just a lot of the communities that I deal with, they are, a lot of them have wells, and for wells, this is a big issue for PFAS, so, you know, so that's less so with the system that you're on, but again, PFAS does become an issue with, you know, if you're a well system, so that's where these filters where I discussed earlier are installed. It's like, yeah, it's one of the mitigation measures.
So people who have individual wells, are they suggested to do their own testing?
They should be tested.
They should, yeah. I mean, it's expensive, so a homeowner with an individual well is gonna pay a lot of money for this testing. Most homeowners with wells, you know, like once a year, they do a basic bacteria test and some other water quality parameters. They don't do this type of testing, but it would definitely be advisable.
Ugh, not many good answers. And I mean, you know, what is the likelihood that the EPA standards would change? They went from 10 parts per million to 4. With how much notice did they do that?
So the EPA didn't have a regulation at 10, that was a New York State regulation. And New York was, you know, one of the few states that actually had a regulation. There were many that didn't. So the EPA set this last April, and that made it universal, you know, across the country.
It's interesting for the country to be more aggressive than New York State. Like what's the concern? I mean, why did it get so severe?
There's health concerns with these compounds in the water.
And actually,
One of the things that caused a lot of alarm was that health, and that's another category that they just call it health effects at certain levels of these compounds. The EPA announced that there were health effects at very low levels of these compounds. There were actually levels that you can't even test. So the data wasn't even available to test to the level that they were saying there's health effects at. I mean, the goal is always 0, but the equipment that's available can't even test down, you know, to that low of a level.
yeah, and just what happened was the EPA was at 20 parts per trillion a few years ago. It was the state of New York that actually lowered it to 10. And then the EPA came is ultimately going to 4 with New York. So New York in essence was ahead of the game a few years ago when they went below the EPA guidelines for PFAS.
Right, okay.
Any more
Well,
questions?
yeah, I don't have any more questions at this time.
Wanna talk about the microplastics?
Oh yeah,
Sure.
on
Yes.
the PFAS, yes.
So this is really an emerging situation as well. So at present, there's no universally approved way of even testing for these compounds. In 2022, California devised their own method and they started doing testing of drinking water on microplastics. I haven't been able to find any results of their testing. So I'm just gonna kind of paraphrase that. New York City does a watershed water quality annual report every year. And this was issued last July, and it's for year 2023. And we've been in communication with them, asking for information from them on what testing they're doing. So they supply over 1 billion gallons of drinking water a day to communities throughout the Hudson Valley New York City, and they are our rural water suppliers, so they would be a good source of information, and they should be testing for these components. So they did start a program based on the California program, the only one that's available. Just from their water quality report of the watershed, they say that microplastics are ubiquitous in the environment and therefore have the potential to enter source waters through surface runoff and atmospheric deposition. To remain at the forefront on emerging contaminants in drinking water, DEP continued to gather baseline information on microplastics by collecting samples on a quarterly basis at the Catskill, Delaware, and the Croton source water monitoring locations in 2023. Because there are currently no standardized or approved methods for the sampling and analysis of microplastics, DEP utilized a contract laboratory and performed experimental monitoring being conducted under section 116376 of the California Health and Safety Code. Samples were analyzed, to identify and count plastic particles greater than 50 micrometers in size. And their results are highly variable. They were from 0.3 to 417 particles greater than 50 micrometers per liter at the Catskill, Delaware water. They took 4 samples that year. And another important thing to note is that these particles were also detected in quality control blanks associated with the samples, which is indicative of introduction of microplastics during sample collection and or analysis. In addition to contract laboratory analysis, DEP began evaluating field filtration methods to minimize potential for environmental contamination. So this is really an emerging and experimental set of samples and studies that are being conducted until there is a universally approved method for collecting and analyzing these samples. It should be considered experimental and not quality data.
And what do they mean by field filtration methods, and is that the same as what they were doing in California?
So field filtration methods is something that you would do out in the field when you're collecting the raw water sample. What they're talking about with the quality control blank, that's also called sometimes a field blank. So when these samples are collected, you would have three bottles. You would have an empty bottle to collect your raw water sample, and then you would have a bottle of pure deionized water that's in a sealed bottle that comes with it. So when the sample is collected in the empty bottle, you take the full bottle of deionized water and you pour that into another empty bottle, and those are all sent back to the lab. So that water should be pure water, and they do that to see if anything is picked up in the environment just while you're collecting the sample. So it's
But even in those pure examples they had, or samples, they still had the same
Yes.
issue.
correct. Yes.
So does that confirm that it's being picked up in the environment, or could it have something to do with the collection devices as well?
Correct, yeah, there's yes. So during the collection and or the analysis, could even be in the lab.
So that's
And for the
a
most
good
part, can we piggyback New York
Also
City since we're
testing.
both using Catskills?
Yes, yeah, I mean, there are raw water suppliers, so we look to them for this information. And I looked at, the possibility of doing our own, and so let's go talk to them and see what they're doing first. And based on the information I have, I wouldn't recommend doing this testing because it's just too experimental and it's not consistent, the information that's coming out of these tests.
The same question, is there any treatment for this that exists? For the microplastics?
Our filtration may remove some of it. I mean, this is, again, it's an emerging thing and we have to be able to accurately measure it before we can even tell, like, cause if there was an approved method now, I would take a sample out of raw water at the beginning of the entry point, at the water plant, and then I would take a sample at the entry point to the distribution system and compare those and see what's happening inside of the plant. But,
Basically, we just really don't know what's going on with this.
correct, yeah, but we are watching and looking for, new information to come out and hopeful that an approved method will be created at some point soon.
So what is the method being used in California? I mean, this is not just a testing method, they have an experimental treatment method, is that right?
Not that I'm aware of, no, I think they're just,
You were just referring to
There-
a testing method.
they're monitoring, correct, for the microplastics, so they created their own method, because there is no universally approved method. And New York City DEP, used that and they had variable results that were not consistent.
Okay.
Are there any other countries that are looking at this, or are we at the forefront?
I would say we're at the forefront. Because
Okay, well,
if another country, another advanced country had an approved method they were using, the EPA would use that as a baseline for creating their own method here.
And is there research showing direct causality to health risks of microplastics in water?
I believe that's still in its infancy as well. There's definitely studies out there that indicate that it's not good for your health.
I think I read recently that they thought that there was like the weight of like a little plastic spoon in people's brains. It's a lot.
well, okay,
On that
so,
note,
well, so here's the
I
thing,
should
so
stop reading.
people are asking about it. And there's no point in putting our heads in the sand, and it's important to talk about. And to say that we are concerned and we are thinking about it. And there are no standard approved methods of testing for these things at this time. And let alone methods of treatment. So, this is where we are. I would certainly like us to stay at the forefront of what's happening in this field and to look high and low to see what we can do proactively. Even if there aren't any reliable methods of testing, if there is any enough it's going to be prohibitive anyhow, but if there are any methods of filtration that we could possibly institute, that we should. I don't know what's going, I'm sure that you need standardized testing methods in order to develop reliable
Right, we have to be able to
methods of addressing it.
accurately and consistently measure what's going in and what's coming out before we could even do a comparison to see what type of method would be having any impact on it. And we stay on top of everything as much as possible. I can tell you myself, people in our office, we subscribe to several water periodicals, we read them, we go to water conferences, seminars, and we're actively monitoring
Okay,
the
it's important to know
industry.
that,
Absolutely,
Yeah,
for
so-
any developments.
we thank you for that, but I guess I just wanna reiterate that we wanna stay on top of current events and current systems, experimental or not. And be ahead of it.
That's what our goal is. Newcastle has always been at the forefront of this. Newcastle was way ahead of many communities when they built the water treatment plant. And our mission is to stay at the forefront of this.
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Barb.
Okay, thank you,
Barb.
Barb,
Thanks for
thanks
coming.
very much. Okay, and now we have some administrative items that Jill can go through.
Right, I'll go through very quickly. We've got retroactive payment of claims for checks dated February 21st and also March 5th of 2025. We've got authorization to accept a cash bond agreement, Stansky. We have authorization to approve a noise waiver. This is for Shether Road Slope Stabilization Project. The contractor is asking us if they would be allowed to start at 7 AM rather than 7:30. There are very few neighbors in the area and we're inclined to give them the authorization if it's okay with the board. Thank you.
Okay, how long are they estimating?
Art, do you know how long the project's gonna be, the
Approximately 3 months.
3 months?
Okay, until, well, what did you say the timing was from, would be from
Instead of
7 to?
7:30, it would be to start at 7, which means they're actually not gonna be doing anything until 7:30. It takes a while to mobilize, so
Okay.
get on site and start.
Alright, well, if this will make it go faster, then, okay, alright.
We've got authorization for a change order that's tectonic on the Minkle Dam. It was a series of permits that were not initially included in the original agreement. Got authorization to approve New York State DOT snow and ice agreements for years 2025 to 2029. The state pays us to maintain during snow emergencies a number of state roads that run through town. We actually plow them, and so this is the agreement that pays us to do that. We have authorization to purchase water meters for DPW, authorization to declare surplus of the police, the Ford Focus, not the electric one, the old gas one. We've got authorization to use town property. This is the Velocity Ride 2025. It's a fundraiser. They've been coming through our town, I wanna say for the past 2-3 years. With much success. We have a request to sell Girl Scout cookies at the train station tomorrow from 3:30 to 5:30. We have authorization to approve the Newcastle and Mount Kisco water and cess tax liens. These are the outstanding water bills that will be included on the town and county tax bills that are being prepared right now. We've got authorization to approve the 2024 general fund contingency. Authorization to approve the 2025 annual ECI contractual increase for contract operations for Veolia, our water plant operator. Authorization to sign and submit documents for New York State DOT culvert replacement project. And authorization to declare type 2 seeker action for the Amsterdam sewer project. This is a component of the CREST grant that we're seeking to obtain. That's it. Are there any questions?
Okay, no, thank you, Jill. So I would ask for motion to adjourn the work session and open the town board meeting. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we are now in our town board meeting. Jill, do you have any announcements?
I'm gonna hold mine.
Okay, and I will hold my supervisor's report for the town newsletter. We got a late start. Apologies to guests waiting to present. So same Jill for your report. Do you have anything?
No,
anything to add
it
today?
it can wait.
Okay. We're going to have a discussion on an issue of public versus private roads, but we have a guest with us today. So, I would suggest that we switch and go to the Sustainable Westchester presentation, if that's okay, Lino? All right, so let's get started.
Well, yeah, I think I was, let's see. Am I live? Good, let's go, yeah, definitely on. Thank you very much, it's really a pleasure to be back with you again. My name is Noam Bramson, pleased to represent Sustainable Westchester, grateful for your time. Congratulate you also on approving the sale of Girl Scout cookies at the train station. Controversial subject, but full leadership from the town board, so well done.
Thank you very much.
And if I could, just at the outset, look for your guidance. Our team has prepared a comprehensive presentation on the Westchester Power Program, history, context, mechanics, impacts. If it is your desire, I'm very happy to review the presentation in its entirety. However, I'm mindful of the fact that it wasn't that long ago that we were together and covered many of those same topics, and it could be that you feel like you already have a good grasp of the program, in which case I'm equally happy to just cut to the chase and talk about the performance of the current contract and to outline the course of action that we are recommending and requesting of you. So I wanna be respectful of your time and preferences, and
Right, well,
maybe
no,
you can tell me whether you want the long or the short version.
Periodically, you do come and present for our community, and I wonder what you think is most effective, when you do it at these meetings, or if we have a special meeting for that purpose, that we advertise much more prominently than we than we do for these town board meetings.
I would say if the goal is to present the full spectrum of sustainable Westchester programming that is either available to you as a municipality or which is publicly facing, then having a meeting devoted to that specifically, perhaps with the involvement of volunteers in the community who are active in this space, might be more effective. If the goal is for you to concentrate on the time-sensitive business that may be before you, and again, if you feel like you already have a grasp of the Westchester Power Program, then I suggest we may wanna make this conversation more abbreviated. Although obviously I'm happy to get into the weeds to whatever degree that you want.
Okay, well, I'm inclined to reschedule if you're so willing, to come back and devote that amount of time for the community and advertise that a little more widely than we've done with this meeting. That would be really helpful and we'd really appreciate that.
Be our pleasure.
And I'd rather focus, so what would everyone else like to do?
I agree, most of us, if not all of us, have heard your presentation many times, and don't say that in a cavalier way, but as a statement of fact. But I think it would be beneficial to the community who may not be aware if we scheduled it and gave notice.
Very happy to do
Let's
that,
just speak
and
for
I'll give you a sneak preview of a notice that's gonna go out in the next couple of weeks. We're gonna be launching a new residential solarized program. And we hope very much that we can partner with the town
That's what.
in promoting it to your residents. So among other things, in addition to the existing program that's readily available, this is gonna be a new offering, and we'll look forward to being able to sort of advertise that to your residents.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I'm comfortable, skipping over the presentation here and doing something focused for the community. But I very much like the idea of doing about the whole portfolio of services that you
Great.
have and under Sustainable Westchester.
Fantastic, and so whatever process you wanna employ, whether it's Jill or Vicky, whoever wants to let us know what kind of scheduling works, our team is delighted to
So,
engage.
yeah.
It'll be Rob.
Okay,
I'm
Rob,
short.
you've been designated, so
Yep, I'm a
Okay,
short timer.
so we'll schedule,
With the SAB.
we'll schedule something.
Terrific, so let me then in that case sort of skip over, let's see now. Oh, there we go, okay. Skip over the bulk of the presentation and go to kind of an update on where we stand right now with respect to Westchester Power, which is our community choice aggregation program. Okay, so you may recall that the last time I was with you, I was in the uncomfortable position of explaining why the contract that commenced towards the end of 2022 featured a electricity supply rate that was persistently and significantly higher than the utility rate. That was not a contract that we were happy about, and I know it created headaches for all of the municipalities that were participants in the program, even though there were good reasons why that occurred related to the war in Ukraine. Today I'm in the happier position of being able to tell you that the current contract is performing much better. And you can see the figures displayed on the screen right now. If you take the base electricity supply, this is before the introduction of renewable energy certificates, our rate is a little over 11 cents per kilowatt hour. You can see the January and February Con Ed rates that are displayed there. We don't have March information yet, but there's no reason to expect it'll be significantly different. So you can see that the Westchester Power rate is below the Con Ed rate. If you add in the premium for the renewable energy certificates, which is really the whole point of the program, it's to green the supply. The 50% rate is also somewhat below the Con Ed rate. The 100% rate is just ever so slightly above, but really sort of on par with what's available from the utility. So we're happy to get back to what has in fact been our typical historical performance over the lifetime of the program, dating back around 10 years now. The years when we've been ahead of the utility and the years when we've been behind it have been roughly equal, with the delta in 2023 and 2024 being a notable outlier because of the circumstances that I mentioned earlier. And also really of note, and we've said this before, but it bears repeating, even in that most recent contract, the prior contract, we were consistently beating the renewable power rates that were available from private ESCOs. So for anyone wishing to receive renewable energy, clean energy, Westchester Power has been a consistently good deal. And in that sense, making that option available to your residents, I think, has been a service that you've provided to the people of Newcastle.
You know what I think is so critical, Noam, is that means nothing to the average viewer, even to some extent myself. What does that translate into in terms of real dollars for people?
Yeah,
I think that's so important.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, everyone's energy consumption varies depending on the size of the home, how you set your thermostat, whether you've installed solar, whether you're using heat pumps. If you're averaging it out, so the typical consumer in Newcastle, let's assume 100 kilowatt, 1,000 rather, use per month. It's probably about $120 per month for electricity supply that's associated with this program. Delivery is separate. Delivery is always a utility responsibility. They own the infrastructure, so that's a separate part of your bill. But again, I'm giving you a general average. Your individual mileage will vary depending on your individual circumstances. So I hope that's a somewhat helpful sort of
Well, I
framing.
mean, the difference between, for example, let's just look at 9.36, I mean, it was a bad year, 2023, but what's the difference between 9.36 and 10? I mean, what are these
Very,
numbers
very,
really-
very minor differences, you know, it's like, I mean, you can think about like the supply portion of your bill and convert that into a percentage, so the difference between 9.5 and 10 is 5%. So if your supply would otherwise be $100, you're paying $105, so not huge amounts. Now, in the 2023-2024 time period, when our rate was 50% higher than the utilities, that started adding up to real money, which is why all of us acknowledged that was problematic. That again is not where we are today, and it's not what the program has been for most of its history. So we've sort of reverted to the mean of having a competitive posture with respect to the utility and having the environmental benefit of renewable energy certificates, which you're not getting from Con Ed. And so in terms of climate action, which I know is a priority for this board, this single program is doing more to reduce regional greenhouse gas emissions, more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with the town of Newcastle than everything else you're doing combined. So it's really deep impact, really important in terms of moving the ball forward on what I think most of us recognize as a crisis for the globe and a crisis for the region.
So these numbers that we're looking at, so if somebody in January or February opted out of the program, they probably aren't seeing a difference really in their bill right now.
Correct.
So but I think that the delivery, I think that's actually where a lot of people are not realizing that doesn't change, depending on whether you're in Westchester Power's program or opted out for the Con Ed base.
You're 100% right. We're purely supply, not delivery. But it does create sometimes a messaging challenge for us because delivery rates are increasing and there's a request from the utilities that's being adjudicated by the state for a further increase. And it could be that people may misunderstand and think that is an artifact of the Westchester Power program. And so we always have to be sort of very clear about what is us and what is not us. When there's a problem, we own it, we don't hide from it. But we're proud of the overall record, and I think when it's clearly understood, the benefits of the program are evident to those who participate in it. But we certainly are grateful for and welcome your reaffirmation of that messaging, because we know you are trusted by your own residents, and it's
Do you have a
important for us to work
standard
together.
messaging for that?
Yeah, and in fact, you probably are starting to receive our monthly reports
Yes.
that sort of describe where we are from a rate perspective, how many folks are enrolled in the town, what is the equivalent removal of vehicles from the road or new trees planted, all the different metrics by which environmental impact can be assessed. So all that's contained in the monthly report. And we encourage you to draw from it to whatever degree you want in your own independent town messaging.
Okay, thank you.
You got it? Got it. So let me again skip over things that I think you're already familiar with and get to what it is that we're requesting right now. The current contract runs through the end of November. That's not gonna change, just to be clear. We're not abrogating the contract, that's gonna be the term. The new contract won't start until December 1. Given that timing, if we had stuck to the schedule that has governed our past efforts, we would probably be waiting a few more months before we came back to you. We're aware it was just very recently that you adopted this contract. We don't wanna overburden you. And there is a little bit of time before we hit the critical path. And yet, evaluating the totality of circumstances, we decided that it was better for us to come to you sooner rather than later and to request respectfully your accelerated authorization of a new contract. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is not related to this particular moment in time, but really to sort of an assessment of what our best practices ought to be. By waiting longer, we are in effect limiting the window of time within which we can make our energy purchase. And as a result of that, if you happen to hit the market at an unfavorable moment, your flexibility is not as great as it might be otherwise. And so by giving ourselves a longer runway, we can be more opportunistic about evaluating market trends and trying to pick our moment in a way that optimizes the rate that we deliver to you. Relatedly, we know that energy rates tend to be lower during the shoulder months before the summer season, when demand really kicks in and pressures those rates up. In theory, that shouldn't matter for a long-term contract, which should be sort of accounting for that seasonality. But markets are imperfect, psychology is what it is, and we'd like at least to have the opportunity of availing ourselves of those shoulder months if it turns out that the indicatives are lower during that period of time. So again, that sort of longer window of opportunity is probably a better practice that maybe should always have been in place for a program like this. Part of our motivation is also specific to this moment in time. We're all looking at the news. We see the kind of uncertainty and turmoil that are surrounding energy markets, the prospect of there being obstructions on the flow of energy from Canada. I'm not going to engage in political commentary. That is not
You're being generous.
that is not my role in a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. But nonetheless, we're all cognizant of the fact that there's some turmoil coming. And to the extent that we maybe can get ahead of that and lock in some stability before that kind of turmoil hits fully, we think that may be advantageous. And so since we were just here having an extensive conversation, really engaging in robust discussion, and since the current contract is performing in a more favorable way than the prior contract, our hope is that you may be comfortable moving more quickly than we have in the past and actually sort of approving the MOU this month or next month so that we have that longer runway we're looking for.
So you
This-
can lock us in long before our contract is expired.
Exactly. We would be in a position, it could be that we don't actually secure the contract until later in the cycle, depending on how the energy markets move. But we'd at least have the option, we'd have the flexibility to be a more effective agent working on your behalf to secure the best possible rate. Now, this happens to be the first presentation I'm giving in this cycle. So I haven't
So we're giving
received-
you a big leeway, a very
Exactly.
big lead time.
Exactly.
We're trusting on your predictive abilities.
Yes, and it's not
Put it
just
mildly.
it's not just, Dan Welsh and Nick Tedrow and myself sitting
Of
around
course
the
not.
room. We're drawing on consultants who have a great deal of expertise in this field, and they're advising us on the timing that could be optimal. The feedback, informal feedback that I've received in speaking to chief administrators and some elected officials has been positive. But again, because this is my very first meeting and because the formal request only went out a couple of days ago, that the action has not yet occurred. But I'm hopeful that the bulk of the municipalities involved in this program, and there are 26 of them, will conclude that this is a logical way to proceed.
Okay,
I'm
so
not quite sure the drawback.
I don't think there really is any, Jeremy, but I'm respectful of the fact that every elected official has different tolerances and a different comfort level with the program and a different degree of comfort with swift action. I think the arguments are pretty compelling for moving forward right now, provided you're satisfied that the program is a beneficial and worthwhile one, but we're not gonna make that assumption without
And the
engaging.
responsive part is when that time comes for you to give that presentation, should people decide that it's not for them or it ends up being the contract is not what they wanted down the road, they can always opt out.
Correct.
so all we're doing differently is giving you a longer runway. And that's really all.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I think it's
Seems like a
smart.
good idea.
I think the timing is right based on conditions and what the market can do, if we wait too long. So I think it's there's a lot of foresight in doing this. And I would certainly be in favor of giving you that flexibility.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm in
okay.
agreement with Vicky.
Me as well.
Me too.
But we don't wanna cut you short, I mean,
No, 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 no.
are we in the middle of your?
Maybe
You know,
that's when you stop talking, we can get the support.
Exactly, I learned long ago, take yes for an answer,
Yep,
you know,
you're
it's like,
ahead, you're ahead.
so
The next
I-
slide is another shoot.
I'm very grateful for that feedback. We have already shared with you the documentation. So I will leave it, I guess, to you, Jill, to figure out when that can be placed on the agenda for action. And certainly if you need anything at all from our team to help facilitate
We'll have
that,
more time to consider, you know, we'll
and if you have questions that
consider,
arise.
we have SAB members here who
Yeah.
might wanna come up to the microphone, I don't know if you wanna wait during public
Or-
comment or, well, considering that you do work with Sustainable Westchester, I'd give you the opportunity to, if you like, you don't have to, we can talk offline, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Kent Thomas, is co-chair of the SAB. I'm very much in favor of this. You know, we're seeing a lot more volatility, actually, I think even than back in 2021 in the markets right now. Natural gas is at a high since 2021, which is used to generate most of the electricity we have, maybe all of it actually, here on the New York Westchester grid. So I think that locking in something now also before, you know, the Canadians turn off the switch for supply or put a 25% surcharge on a tariff, I think negotiating is right now is the thing to do, definitely. Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
All right, well,
there seems to be,
again-
you know, a simple calculus here, so
May all your colleagues in the world of municipal government have a similar reaction. So I
Good luck.
truly
Good luck
thank
to
you.
you.
Look forward to coming back for that more comprehensive presentation that we talked about.
okay,
and,
yeah, we'll be in
we'll
touch
be
to
in touch.
schedule that.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, I appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much, no,
Great to see
thank
you. Yeah, just takes it out of this so that you're not permanently burdened with my presentation. Alright, that's
Oh,
good.
got it.
Alright.
Can you share your deck with us?
I already have actually, so
Yeah, I have
Okay.
the deck, I just need the paper.
It should be in the email that Dan sent, but if not,
Oh, okay.
I'll make sure we got it to you, so,
Okay,
yeah.
terrific, yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Alright, thank you again, have a wonderful night.
Thank you very
as well,
much.
thank you.
Thank you, Jen and Ken.
And if you could share that,
I have it from, it's the one
you
that
did?
came out yesterday?
yeah.
I got it. No problem.
Okay. Hang on, you know what, I'm looking for that burn ban resolution,
Here.
that's for later, thank you. Okay. That's for later, thank you, okay. So next on our agenda is going to be a short discussion on public versus private roads. Now periodically, people who live on private roads often get in touch with us because they have difficulty plowing their roads. They would like to know if they could come to an arrangement with the town to plow their public roads. So the basic rule of thumb, the way it's been described to me, it's as if someone would ask the town to plow their driveway. So basically, just as a, you know, foundational understanding, it's not something that the town does, but there are ways that a private road can become a public road. So I'm going to ask Lena, our town attorney, to go over those you know, standards and specifications by which that can happen.
Sure. So in terms of private roads, I mean, there is a mechanism under town law and also there's a way to petition. So the way it works is any private road, any subdivision plat that's filed with the county or recorded with the county, whenever you have a subdivision, those roads on a subdivision plat are deemed an offer of dedication. And what that means is that you can have, if you live in that particular subdivision, you can make a request to have that private road offered for dedication, and that becomes a public street. But there's a process to do that. It has to be a formal request, written request to your board. And you have to also confer with your DPW because we cannot accept roads that really do not meet our town spec in terms of what the standards are. So when you get a petition, not every road that's private can be made a public road. because again, it doesn't meet the specs for safety and what the Department of, DPW deems as a safe and town road. There's another procedure under town law, section 200, where a resident can petition the town board to come and request improvements to the road to make it wider, to make two sidewalks, but that's also, again, it's a petition, it's made before your board. You also have to look at your DPW and ask to see whether or not that road can be made public or improved. And oftentimes, when you have a private road, if it is substandard, that doesn't meet town spec, in order for the town to take it over, what residents on those private roads have to do is they have to spend the money to improve that road and offer it. And so they have to spend the money to get it to town spec and widen it, whatever the case may be, before we can even accept it. So
Is it a supermajority of residents that need to?
so that depends on the situation and how many residents. So for example, when you have these paper streets, private streets, there's one request that has to be 80% of the folks who live on that street. You have to have frontage on that private road or paper street. So that depends on the situation. But yes, there's a component.
Frontage meaning if you're on a corner lot or it's moved, does it have to be any frontage or frontage in the
Front
facing from the front
so
lawn?
if you take a line in a road and just put houses on either side, on a private street, technically you own to the center line. Again, I'm speaking in generality here. So anyone who fronts that street, okay, has, the driveway comes out of it or fronts it, they own to the center line. And the house on the opposite side of the street owns the other side of that center line. So if that private street they all get together, and again, in certain circumstances, it's 80% that have to agree to make that road public, if you will. If it's substandard, we can't take it over. But if they wanna spend the monies among themselves, because usually those are governed by an HOA, and widen the road, but don't forget, it involves each resident of that private street to give a little piece of their property away. Some of those properties may be mortgaged, so you have to get the banks to consent on those, so it's not an overly simplistic process, there are some complexities to it.
So typically it's the width of the street that is the restriction?
It's the width, right, cause we have to have our trucks to get through in our highway.
Is there anything, are there any other specs that tend to
Pitch.
be problematic? Yeah, like the pitch.
The grade, exactly, the grade could be a problem. I mean, there are a host of factors that our, DPW superintendent would go look at to see if that's the case.
Drainage.
Yeah, drainage.
Drainage is one, I mean, all these factors are looked at, besides the width, you're right, there's the grade of the road, there's the pitch of it, there's the actual, what the road is made of,
The depth of the.
the depth of the asphalt and macadam.
Yep.
And again, I've been involved in situations on the other end where residents have come to me to petition a municipality, but they've all had to contribute to improve the road before the town even took it over. And that can be a considerable expense.
Right, and would that raise their taxes? Because presumably their properties are assessed a certain way.
It would raise their tax, again, they're paying right now into a homeowners association, most likely that plows and pays their roads. So that's their expense.
Okay, so it would probably be a wash or better. But I guess the other threshold is that they have to agree.
Yeah.
You know,
Right,
it's
and-
not just
and-
whether the town,
Right, and they also have, to, again, if it's several individuals on that private roadway, there's a certain percentage that has to agree. And also, again, if there's mortgages on those properties, the banks have to release, you have to get the request to release that portion, because it is your property, you're going to the center line. So if your deed has that roadway and the bank has a mortgage on that property, they would have to release that portion of the right of way in order to do that.
how likely is that?
I've seen it happen, not always, but I've seen it happen.
Right, well, if the bank has an interest in the property, that might be seen as improving, the value of the
Potentially,
property,
right, but it doesn't always
I don't
happen.
know. Who knows how the banks calculate these things? Okay, so that
But the-
should answer.
Yeah, I mean, what the public should know, again, is that if it's a subdivision plat that's filed with the county, if it's a private road that shows, it's always a continuing offer dedication unless the plat says otherwise. But it requires a formal step, meaning it has to be in writing, a request has to come to your board. And then you get that request and you go to your Department of Public Works, and for all those factors, width of the road, grade, pitch, all that has to be looked at. And if the road for some reason meets our town spec, then what would happen is you would pass a resolution accepting that road as a public road, and then they would have to formally deed that portion to the town. But again, the likelihood of that road on a subdivision plat being exactly to town spec, That's, that I don't know, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Okay, so when you say, that they have to file a subdivision plat or that something is filed with the county, do you mean an existing formal subdivision such as Random Farms or
Yeah, there would be
Old Farm?
right, I mean, there are some properties that pre-exist subdivision, cause back in the old days, they used to subdivide by deed, which you cannot do in the state anymore, but yeah, so there would be a
But these are mostly like just streets, I
right, those
believe,
streets
those are the
were-
residents who are mostly asking for this.
Right, and those streets, with however they were laid out in the past, of recent vintage, they would be done by subdivision, so if I own 4 acres of property, I wanna cut it up and subdivide it, I file a plat, I get it approved by the planning board. As the owner of that development, I can say, well, I really wanna keep this as private streets. Or I can say, look, I'm gonna develop this subdivision to town spec, so that if the residents want to one day have it offered to the town for dedication as a public roadway, the road would have been built to those standards. But to your point, right, you have old neighborhoods here that probably predate any subdivision regulation.
So that would be their first step, is they have to file for a subdivision.
They would, the first step is to see if they are part of a filed subdivision, that would be the first step. So if your neighborhood has a filed, is part of an old subdivision that was filed, you can look at their deed, cause sometimes deeds will refer to the subdivision map filed in such and such a date. So that'd be the first step. And if it's part of a subdivision plat, then you can see whether the road was meant to be a town spec road or not. For those individuals who live on streets and neighborhoods that pre-existing subdivision and they don't have a plat, the process would be under that section of the town law, which is Town Law 200 of the New York State Town Law. They would have to request in writing a petition to make that road a public road. But again, that it goes to making that with spec, all subject to what DPW thinks is a safe town road. And they would have to improve it using their own funds. Cause your example you gave earlier, we can't just plow people's driveways because that's deemed a gift of public funds. That's why towns don't plow private driveways.
Okay,
Thank you, Lena.
thank you, Lino.
Thank you.
Alright. And now I would like to announce that the town will be instituting a burn ban. I'm sure everyone knows by now that New York has experienced some severe wildfires, particularly in Long Island. We have terrible situation there. I'm not sure what the current status of that wildfire is. But we're expecting that this is going to be a high risk period of time where we have very dry conditions that are predicted. And so I know that the governor has instituted a burn ban and our fire chiefs have asked for that and it's the prudent thing to do. So we will be declaring a ban of open burning debris and brush starting from March 16th through May 14th. And that has historically been a high fire danger risk period. And this will start actually, sorry, Jill, I'm looking at the resolution we have here. And it's stating, okay, since 2009, New York has usually banned, have had a burn ban statewide from March 16th through May 14th.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're instituting it from March 11th
Yes.
through May 15th. So that's the difference, that's what we're doing. We're just doing it a bit early because this fire season has started early and pretty seriously. So we will be proclaiming that and sending that out. Will we be sending out a code red? We'll certainly be putting it on the website
Yes.
and in the town newsletter. And how else will we be announcing
It'll
that?
be posted around town hall. We will be sending out the e-newsletter. We'll also be alerting the fire departments who we worked with in order
Right.
to create this, so that they will be sending it out, posting it on their websites as well. And
The electronic sign?
Yeah, did we send out a code red last summer?
yeah,
We
for-
did.
When we did-
e-alerts. Did we do it next summer as well?
E-alerts,
Did we do the?
Next, I'm not sure, E-alert for sure.
We'll ask the chief tomorrow morning at the department head meeting.
Okay, I think we should do it in all possible ways because it is a serious concern. Okay. Alright, so now we'll go to public comment. seeing that there's no one in the audience for public comment, is there anyone online for public comment?
No hands are raised.
Okay, no public comment this week. Okay. And now we'll turn to Jill, do you wanna give us a run through of the consent agenda?
Yes. So for our consent agenda, we have authorization to accept the cash bond for Stansky, authorization to approve the noise waiver for Shether Road Slope Stabilization Project, authorization to approve the change order for Titanic, authorization to approve the New York State DOT snow and ice agreement for years 2025 through 2029, authorization to purchase water meters from DPW, authorization to declare surplus one of the police vehicles, the old Ford Focus, authorization to use town property that's gonna be Gedney Park and its Velocity Ride 2025, authorization to use town property by the Girl Scouts, that's gonna be at the Chappaqua train station tomorrow from 3:30 to 5:30, authorization to approve the Newcastle Mount Kisco water rents as tax liens, authorization to approve the 2024 general fund contingency, authorization to approve the 2025 annual ECI contractual increase for contract operations, that's for Veolia, and authorization to sign and submit documents for New York State DOT culvert replacement project C8801-091A, and authorization to declare type 2 seeker action for the Amsterdam sewer project.
Okay. Do you wanna go through the proposed actions or we can just
You know what,
Simply-
you're gonna take and read full resolutions for each one of these? Do you want me to go through them? I can, but yeah, that's fine.
so it's not necessary, we're gonna go through the resolutions.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with the resolutions. Holly, do you wanna
Sure.
start?
I move to adopt items 1 through 13 as listed on the consent agenda.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye. I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims in the amount of $598,220.72. Listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail reports all dated February 21st, 2025. Checks are printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Friday, February 21st, 2025.
second,
All in favor? Aye.
I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims in the amount of $527,371.90 listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail reports, all dated March 5th, 2025. Checks were printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Wednesday, March 5th, 2025.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna jump in here.
Uh,
I very regretfully accept, not willfully, not with any ease, and not voluntarily, the retirement of Jill Simon Shapiro from the position of town administrator within the town of Newcastle, effectively, I will have to say sadly, March 29th of 2025, the year of our town administrator. The great year of our town administrator. On behalf of everyone in town with a capital T, and just everyone who lives in the town of Newcastle, we are incredibly thankful for your selfless dedication, hard work, tireless commitment to the town of Newcastle, and all the fixins that you've done here for 35 years, and in my brief time during your tenure in the past 9+ years, although a little before that as town prosecutor, you have been incredible, beyond an asset. I will save my words for another time. So regretfully and sadly, that is the application and motion that I make.
Did you say all of the fixings?
Yeah, all the fixins that she's done around
I
town.
love that. I can't possibly top that.
All the fixins, but
I think you
He
said
acted
it for
himself.
everyone. Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, I second that well articulated motion.
and council, if we don't agree, just to be clear, what happens?
It passes anyway.
I wasn't gonna say all in favor, but
All in favor with air quotes?
yes, all in favor with air quotes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so all that drama now.
Hard to move on from that.
Yeah,
This one's gonna sound boring.
Respectfully to our new hires, I move to authorize the posting and hiring of 4 laborers within the Department of Public Works,
water and highway units at their hourly rate ranging from $16.50 to $19 per hour for a period of 12 weeks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Jen, do you wanna
My turn?
take the others? Yeah.
I move to accept the resignation of Rob Fleischer as the Town of Newcastle liaison to the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board effective March 11th, 2025. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Rob.
May I have a second?
Second.
I just wanna thank Rob for, he has represented the town on the local airport advisory board and on the county for less time than the local board, but altogether, he's been advocating for the town for 7 years, and he's done a tremendous job. He was very informed on all of the topics related to the airport, and I wanna thank him for his dedication and hard work on this. So thank you, Rob. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the nomination of Greg Elders as the Town of Newcastle liaison to the Westchester County Airport Advisory Board effective March 12th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the appointment of the following individuals to the Airport Advisory Committee for a one-year term effective February 14th, 2025 through December 31st, 2026. Eric Dorsch, David Katz, Asher Feinberg, Jonas Warner.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hold on a
Sorry,
second, is
something
that,
wrong? I think this really ends up being a 2-year term, Lauren. Cause it's February 14th, 2025 to December 31st, 2026.
I wanted to make it end on December 31st, so it doesn't keep it February or
well, we
No, no,
started,
it's fine.
we gave them a 1 year, the airport advisory board has 2-year
It's
term,
not 11.
is it for a 2-year term? And these individuals were appointed for a 1-year term in order to stagger.
In order to stagger,
The
so,
terms.
yeah,
So we want this to end
2027.
in 2 years.
which is 2026, so I
It is
think,
December 31, 2026.
yeah, I think you can, I
It's
think
almost
we just make it the
2
2-year
term.
term, that's all.
Okay, should I read it again?
Just to.
No, no.
Yeah, I think
Just amend it.
It's
amended.
a
Yeah, that's
2-year
fine.
term.
Yeah.
For a
That's fine.
term just shy of a month.
Second.
we are
Yeah.
appointing for a 2-year term, and you read the dates correctly, so that's accurate. And you seconded?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the appointment of T.R. Kelly as a member of the Conservation Board for a 2-year term effective April 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2027.
I second and thank him for volunteering.
Yes, thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to approve the bill and sale and art purchase agreement with Tom Caranta to create a painting called Just Be, in which the town shall pay the artist $1,250, in which 25% of which shall be payable upon execution of the agreement, and the remaining 75% of which shall be payable upon completion of all the conditions as set forth in the agreement.
Second.
And before I ask for vote, I just wanna say that this is the beginning of our mural project.
Yes, very
So
exciting.
thank you, Jen, for being the liaison and working so hard with the Arts and Culture Committee on this.
Well, thank you the town board for agreeing to this, and this is a very exciting motion to
We're
read.
We're very excited. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Wanna switch over, Holly? Do you wanna take the burn ban?
Do I need to read the whole thing?
No,
Just
maybe
The first and
the,
the last.
whereas Governor Hochul has declared a burn ban for areas of New York State, including Westchester County, based on a lack of rainfall and high winds constituting a high fire risk. Therefore be it resolved that the town of Newcastle follows in turn and declares a burn ban on all forms of open burning, including campfire, brush burning, and debris fires from Tuesday, March 11th, 2025 through March 15th, 2025.
May.
May 5th,
May 15th, 2025.
Second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.